Welcome, everyone. This is the Shooting It Straight podcast with Justin Jackson. I am producer John. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity HR. The show budget is going up. I don't know if you guys noticed, the longtime listeners, but we have that intro now, a good way to get into the show. It is an intro made by the team here at Inside Carolina with different screenshots of the Inside Carolina website at various moments in UNC history. So one of the screenshots, if you look very closely, is of the 2017 national championship with Justin's face there on the front page. So we thought that's a cool way to start out tonight's show. We appreciate everyone watching us here tonight. A lot to talk about. We are in the middle of ACC play. Just like that, we're kind of right into the middle of it. UNC has two tough games this week coming up against SMU and against NC State, I believe, on Saturday. I will double check that. Yes, NC State is on Saturday as well. We also titled the show Home Reset because it's an opportunity for UNC to kind of take a breath after so much travel, such a challenging non-conference schedule, to play a few games in a row in the state of North Carolina. UNC does not leave the state again until January 28th against Pittsburgh. That road game, they have two road games against State and Wake Forest and otherwise home games. So a good time to get into some rhythms, build some good routines. And yeah, we appreciate everyone watching. We're going to talk all about that and more tonight. But first, let's talk a little bit about the game that was a really exciting game on Saturday against Notre Dame, punctuated by a really big shot by Elliot Cadeau. Justin, what were your biggest takeaways from that Notre Dame win?
Yeah, I think this proves my point perfectly of how every ACC game is going to be tough. I think we lost my sophomore year going into South Bend and losing against Notre Dame. So it's a it's a tough environment, especially if you let the crowd get involved and um, the players kind of get going. I know they had a player in Burton who was coming back after what I think missed 7 games or something like that. But before that, I think they said on the broadcast he was averaging like 25 and 6 or something like that. So obviously, having somebody back like that, this team is going to be, they're going to have an extra step and an extra gear to them. But I think as I watched the game back, I think I wasn't necessarily as disappointed as I thought. Um, you probably could be after a buzzer beating win against a team that's not necessarily supposed to be that great. Defensively, I thought that they were really, really good. Other than some lapses and some lulls there, physicality wise, pressure wise, I felt like they were actually really good. I think it came down to having that one defensive stopper, which is where you see this team miss Seth so much, and being able to slow down Burton, because I think in that second half he kind of imposed his will at a few different spurts there. But I think as a team, honestly, as a whole, I wasn't as disappointed, or there wasn't as many glaring issues that I really thought that there was if I went back and watched it. I think offensively they can get a little bit better. Shooting the ball wise, I think they could get a little bit better. But outside of those things, I mean, I can't really sit here and say this is really, really an issue that we saw in this game. So, we can break it down a little bit, but I think I thought it was a really good game. I thought it was a game where you're coming off of a loss against Louisville, going to Louisville, 2 back-to-back away ACC conference games. You go into Notre Dame and go against a team that is struggling themselves, but get a guy back that's really good and a big key part of your team. So you play with a little more effort, have some really big runs, and to be able to still close out the game. Obviously, you hate to see that it has to end with a game-winning three from Elliott, but at the same time, a win is a win in ACC play, and you'll walk away from it and you'll take it for sure.
You referenced Marcus Burton. That was absolutely one of my takeaways from the game. He played only 23 minutes, but he scored 23 points, extremely efficient from the 2-point range and from the free throw line as well. So a shout out to him. He played very good basketball. Someone else who played really, really well was Ian Jackson. Again,
Mhm.
for the Tar Heels. I have a few stats on Ian. He's the first Tar Heel freshman ever to score 23 or more points in 4 straight games. He's the first freshman to score 20 or more since Tyler Hansbrough in 2005 and 2006 season. So anytime you're comparing yourself as a Tar Heel player to Tyler Hansbrough, that's really, really good company to be in. Ian just really skilled at putting the ball in the basket, 27 points, 2 of 7 from three, but did a lot of his work from two, 9 of 11 on 2-point shots. Just a really impressive game from him. I think he's took a step a little bit too as a playmaker. He saw the floor a little bit more, I think, in this game, starting to set up his teammates a little bit more. Justin, he's starting to put the ball in the basket every single game. What's the next steps for Ian Jackson? How can he continue to grow for the Tar Heels this season?
Yeah, I mean, Ian has something that is just kind of God given. He has. I've been around a good amount of guys that just have an ability to score really whenever they want to. And I think what's so great about him is he can score from every single level. And not only can he score at every level, he can score off the bounce, he can score off the catch. Um, and so it's extremely impressive. I think on the telecast they were saying that he was, I think, only the second UNC freshman to score 23 before this game, 23 in 3 games straight, besides Phil Ford. So if your name's ever in a sentence with Phil Ford or Tyler Hansbrough when it comes to UNC history, it's you're doing some things right. So for him, I think the next step for him is just going to be defensively. Offensively, he's shooting the ball really well. He's getting to the lane. Without Seth, he's really the main and only guy that's able to really get to the paint and finish once he gets there. But he also has a mid-range game. We've seen a few, over the last couple games. I've seen a few, under out of bounds plays where he comes off and it's, basically just a mid-range catch and shoot. So being able to score at every single level, I think it's allowing him to really just free up every aspect. But when I look at him, I think defensively, if he's able to, whether it's show more physicality or, at times it can kind of look like he doesn't necessarily know what his assignment is, or maybe he's just a little lost in, what the defensive call is at that time. So I think on that end is kind of the main things I would say for him individually to kind of take his game to the next level. But offensively, we've talked about this team. Offensively, it's been, they've been really good, but defensively has been kind of where it's tough for them. I think it's kind of flipped in these last 2 ACC games, where defensively I've been impressed with their pressure, their physicality, getting over screens, communication, things like that. It's just offensively, I think there's certain lulls where maybe there's not enough ball movement, or teams might take them out of what they want. But having a guy like Ian being able to score, whenever he possibly wants to, I think that's been huge. And I think going forward, the more and more that he's able to do this, like I said, I'll still stand on, will he have 23 plus points every single ACC game? That's a really difficult feat to accomplish. Does he have the ability to do it? Easily. Um, but just knowing that you have somebody that can, I think he started 2 for 8 in that game against Notre Dame and finished the half with 17 points. So having somebody that can just score at will just opens up and changes this whole dynamic of this team. So for him, it's just a matter of being consistent. If he can be consistent as much as possible, I think it helps this team so much.
One of the things we've talked about is Seth and his ability to score the basketball in transition. He's really special at that. UNC hasn't had Seth. That has maybe been lacking a little bit, the transition scoring recently. But having Ian in the half court and being able to sort of just give him the ball and let him score in the half court, that has been really huge for this offense. I'm going to take it one step further, Justin. You can pull me back or you can give me your thoughts on this. It's starting to feel a little bit like this is Ian Jackson's team in some ways. I know RJ is so talented and he had all the preseason accolades. I know that, but you have a player in RJ who's struggled so far this year. Ian takes a lot of attention from the defense and allows RJ to maybe find some more open looks. You kind of slot Ian in there as that primary scorer. Elliott is the distributor, and then RJ is free to just make open shots, and that takes some of the pressure off of him. This is a team that's been stuck in neutral a little bit this season. They're 9-6. They've been talked about, like we talked about last week, as an NCAA tournament bubble team a little bit. Maybe leaning on Ian Jackson more, really opening up the offense and playing through Ian is a good way to spark this offense and spark the rest of the season. What do you think about that, Justin? Is that too far halfway through Ian's freshman season?
I'm going to say pump the brakes just a little bit. I think there's a few things you have to take into account when it comes to everything that's going on right now. For one, you have to give Ian his credit in being able to score the ball that he can, the way that he can, and the way that he has the last 4 games. But I think it's different, right? Like RJ, everybody's worried about RJ and how inefficient he's shooting and how hard it is for him. If you look at RJ every single time he comes off of any kind of action, whether it's a ball, a pick and roll action or coming off of a down screen, there's 2 guys on him at every single point, right? Whether it's the big hard hedging and double teaming basically to get the ball out of his hand, or he's coming off a down screen and the big just kind of steps out to help the guard that's guarding him. Um, when you look at Ian, a lot of his offense that he's getting is basically one-on-one, and he's showing that you can't necessarily guard him one-on-one. But because RJ has so much attention on him, kind of like what you're saying with on the flip side, because RJ has so much attention and so much gravity pulling towards him, it leaves Ian on an island against his defender the majority of the time. And so for me, I'm not going to sit here and say this is Ian's team. RJ just became the second leading scorer in North Carolina history. So I can't switch and jump ship and hop on Ian's boat when it comes to this is his team. Now, do I think Ian is moving on up the scouting report pretty fast? Yes, 100%. I think whenever you see RJ's name, it's probably double circled, and Ian's name is circled one time right underneath him. But to sit here and say after 4 games that this is his team, that's hard for me to say after everything that RJ has done and provided for this program on a pretty consistent basis. It's just he's not shooting the ball great right now, right? And nobody loves to see it. Fans hate to see it. They think oh, he's not who he used to be, or he's not as good as he was last year. It's going to be hard to match what he did last year, and it's going to be even harder coming back after a season like that where teams are just basically only focusing on you and letting everybody else kind of play one-on-one or kind of do their own thing. So I think if Ian is able to continue to play this way, then you will see a lot more of RJ being freed up, because even though Ian had 23 points the 3 games coming into this game, the scouting report didn't look like it changed a ton when it came to, hey, now we really got to make sure that we key in on Ian as opposed to RJ. RJ was still coming off, and it was bigs in his face, making him pick the ball up off the pick and roll, making sure that he doesn't get a shot. All of his shots kind of seemed like they were difficult. And so I think for me, if Ian is able to stay consistent and play well and give that scoring punch, teams are going to have to make an adjustment for him, which will just open it up for him, for RJ. So I'll say pump the brakes, just a little bit. Now, if we're 5 games down the road and it's still going this way, then we might have to revisit this conversation. But not yet. I'll say not yet. RJ is still RJ Davis, who has his jersey up in the rafters, and like I said, is the second leading scorer in this entire North Carolina university. So I say let's hold off for a little bit and let's watch a little more and have a little bit more of a sample size.
And a big piece of that as well is some of this success for Ian and all the shots that he's taking and the scoring that he's doing has come without Seth on the floor. He's kind of stepped up to fill the gap that Seth has left. And let's give our viewers a little bit of an update on Seth. This came from the Inside Carolina reporters earlier today. Jeremiah Holloway posted this on the Inside Carolina Premium message board, so I'll read this out for our viewers. Hubert Davis had a weekly ACC Zoom press conference call, and on that call, he said Seth practiced with the team on Sunday and did a full contact drill, but still was not sure that he would play Tuesday against SMU. Hubert went on to say that the team practiced at 3 p.m. today, so that practice is already done, and they'd know more after that practice. So it sounds like still questionable at best for Seth, but it does present a really, really interesting question that we asked some of our viewers already. What happens with the starting lineup when Seth returns? So I'll really quickly read a few of these comments I asked in the live chat here. What should the starting lineup be when Seth returns? Here's what Greg said. He said, Cadeau, RJ, Ian, Powell, and Washington, Seth, and Brown. James Brown getting some love from Greg Ward first off the bench there. And I'll give one more here from longtime viewer and friend of the program, Sean Crowley. He says RJ, Ian, Seth, EC, and pick your big. I can't get on board with starting all four of the guards. But Justin, what do you think? When Seth comes back, does anything change with the starting lineup for you? How would you start to shuffle the pieces?
I think at this point it's going to be difficult. I'm glad I'm not in the seat of trying to figure out what the starting lineup and the rotations are going to look like. Seth might be in a situation where it's just unfortunate that the person that kind of steps into his role is just playing really, really well and is a huge reason for them winning this last game and being in the Louisville game and things like that. I don't think that takes away from Seth's importance of this team at all, whether he's starting or he's coming off the bench being the sixth man. I think he still has been, up to this point, the most consistent player for this North Carolina team. Now, with Ian playing the way that he's playing, I think now we could kind of shift to him being really consistent if he continues it. But with Seth, he just brings so much. Like I said before, if Seth is on the floor, I don't think Burton has the kind of second half that he had necessarily. I don't think the game's as close as it ended up being. I think Seth takes that individual task, and he does a really good job with that. I think also besides Ian, Seth is kind of the only, I'll call him a stubborn driver, physical downhill driver that's able to get to the rim and finish, as opposed to an RJ or Elliott who kind of go in there at times just looking for a foul because they are smaller. So I think you miss those aspects of Seth's game the most. Now he can also get in there and rebound. He's also shown that he can shoot the ball pretty well if left open. And so all of those combined makes him, to me, if not the most consistent and the best player for this North Carolina team so far, top three. So, with that being said, do I think he'll start? Do I think he'll come off the bench? I'm not sure. I think, for the first game, I could see him coming off the bench and being kind of an Elliott, RJ, Ian, Drake, and then Jay Wash probably. But I think it'll be still, kind of a rotation of kind of just seeing how things go. Just like, there for a second, Van Allen Lubin was starting. Now Jay Wash has started. Jay Wash played really well. Besides a few, travels or some strips down low, Jay Wash I thought played really well for this North Carolina team. And so, next game might be different, right? Having Seth back, Ian might struggle and he might have a rough shooting game. Okay, now you know what, Seth? Now it's time to get back in there and you go do what you need to do, right? I think that's the beauty of having so many good guards at times and so many good guys that can, if one guy's having an off day, the next guy can step up. So to answer your question, I think Seth probably comes off the bench this next game. If I had to guess, just purely because of Ian being so hot and being able to score the ball the way that he has. But I think he should still play 30 plus minutes. I don't think that should necessarily keep him from being on the floor just because he brings so much to this team and so much for them on both ends of the floor.
This is driving a lot of conversation in the chat, so we appreciate everyone posting their thoughts, their questions here with us live on YouTube. We're live every single Monday night during the college basketball season. Dr. J says, or you go small, EC, RJ, Seth, Ian, and Drake. That's a very, very small lineup there. I agree with you about Seth and his defense and his rebounding. I spent a while thinking about this. I mean, this is a tough decision. This is why head coaches make the big bucks. They have to sort of put all these pieces together and things like that. Where I ultimately landed was bringing Seth off the bench in that super six-man role, maybe even closing games with him as well. I know UNC has gone with the four smaller guard lineup to close games in the past, so maybe that's part of the answer. But I don't think you can start with that four small guard lineup. But as we've talked about as well, some of it's matchup dependent, and it'll vary as the season goes along. Another big theme for UNC so far in conference play, I know this is only 3 games, but still it's something to keep an eye on, is some of the offensive struggles. You hit the nail on the head earlier, Justin, when you talked about when you look at the season at large, the North Carolina offense is better than the defense currently in the adjusted efficiency metric on KenPom for the whole season. UNC is 26th in offense and 58th on defense. But just in the smaller sample size, the last 3 games, that has flipped. The defense playing better than the offense. Looking at some of the conference-only stats on KenPom, UNC is 17th in offensive efficiency and 18th in three-point percentage. They're shooting 24.6% on three-pointers in their 3 conference games, which is definitely not where you want to be. Another stat that stood out to me as I was looking at it, corner threes in the last 5 games, UNC is shooting 23.5%. That's 4th percentile nationally. So that's not where you want to be. So Justin, looking at the offense, what are some of the different things that you see in terms of how the offense could improve?
Yeah, I think there's a few things on this team that's just not going to change for the rest of the season. They're not going to all of a sudden grow a 7-footer that's super physical and can block shots and there's a lob threat. They're not just going to all of a sudden, that's not going to pop up in the locker room randomly tomorrow. So size wise, the guards aren't going to all of a sudden get taller and bigger. Um, those things aren't going to change. Shooting the ball, I think, is something that can change over the period of the entire season. I think you can start off rough. I think guys can kind of find a rhythm. The way shooting is, it's all about rhythm and feel of the game. So you see in a guy like Ian right now, he's in a really good rhythm. When he shoots the ball, you expect it to go in. A guy like RJ, all it takes for him is to have 1 or 2 really good games to get into that rhythm. I mean, you see a guy like Elliott, he was 3 for 22 going into that game against Notre Dame and hit 2 threes, including the game winning 4-point play. So shooting is just all about rhythm and the flow of the game and, stepping in shots confidently. So I think that can get better. I think it's just a matter of guys, you know, staying confident, stepping into those shots confidently and preparing for those in practice or outside of practice or whatever it is. I think when it comes to the offensive struggles and when it comes to the corner 3 in particular that you're seeing, I think a lot of times in an offense, you're probably least strongest 3-point shooter is going to end up being in the corner a lot of times because that's kind of where, you just don't really have them necessarily all the way in the offense. And the way that this offense runs a lot of times, it's a lot of stagger screens for RJ. Now you're seeing a lot for Ian, or it's high pick and rolls and things like that. So you're seeing a lot of what we've seen in the past, unfortunately, of how defenses used to guard Leaky when he was on the floor, right? Like now, this was kind of the first game that I saw them guard Drake in that same way. And I think you have some of the clips to kind of show that. Um, I think what's difficult about all of this is a lot of times if you're coming in, you don't necessarily know what to do if somebody's not guarding you, right? The only thing you think to do is if you get the ball, just to shoot it. And unfortunately, that's kind of what the defense is wanting you to do. They're kind of leaving you there to because that's what they want to give up. So, for instance, with this play, we've got Jay Wash at the top of the key, and like I had mentioned, it's kind of a stagger type of situation with I think that's Elliott setting the first screen and Drake's the second screener. So as RJ comes off, his Drake being the second screener, his man is more than likely going to be the tag guy, which is what we call the guy that helps on the big that's rolling. So as RJ comes off this stagger, and then he comes off the ball screen, the big is going to roll and he's probably going to get behind his defender. So what that means is now the tag guy has to get all the way in there to tag him. So if you want to push it forward just maybe one. So you see how the big is rolling. Now Drake's guy is all the way underneath Jay Wash in the paint, right? And they've got two guys, once again, like I had mentioned before, they've got two guys chasing RJ at all times. So the one thing you have to give up is a Drake three, which in this situation, it seemed like the coach was wanting to give up. So if you click it one more, you see kind of where his defender ends up being and where he is, right? So, okay, yes, do I want Drake to step into this shot confidently and knock it down 100%? I will always be a proponent of, hey, even if you're considered a non-shooter, you have to keep them honest at some stage of the game, right? You've got to shoot one or two, maybe three of them. And if you make one or you make two of them, then now they can't necessarily tag all the way down by the charge circle. So you have that. So then what are the adjustments to this, right? Because you don't want to see this all season. You want to see, some of the issues that we had with Leaky a few years ago was okay, now he's just on the perimeter, but his guy is able to help wherever he needs to help. So what are some of the adjustments? So now the next clip, you have RJ coming off and Drake is in the corner. And if you see it for the people that are watching, if you look and see where Drake's man is helping, I mean, he's not worried about Drake at all, right? Honestly, and even Elliott's defender isn't really worried about him either. So you have defense basically being able to key in on RJ in this whole pick and roll without any kind of repercussions, at least in their mind, because Drake is just out on the perimeter. Well, if you run it one more click, instead of Drake just sitting there in the corner, now you cut and you force your guy to have to make a decision. Like, am I going to stay with this roll guy or am I going to have to guard Drake because he's cutting to the basket for an easy layup and easy dunk? Well, the great read that Drake made, now RJ makes a great pass, boom, it's a dunk. Now the defense has to make a decision of, hey, are we going to help as much as we're helping? Or are we going to continue to kind of give this up because now they've made an adjustment as opposed to just guys just sitting on the perimeter? And I think in the second half, they had kind of the same situation, the same play. This time it was Jay Witt being in the corner. Elliott was up top. And if you run it one more clip, they swing it over to Elliott. Elliott has the ball. He's coming off of a pick and roll. Now Jay Witt's man is all the way in the charge circle waiting to help on the roll guy and Jay Wash. All it takes is one cut, boom, Elliott sees it. It's an alley-oop dunk. Now the defense has to make even more adjustments, right? Like that's kind of what you have to be able to do if you have some guys that teams don't necessarily respect. Do I respect Drake as a shooter? I think Drake can be a really, really good spacer. But right now, when it comes to the numbers and maybe what the other teams are wanting to give up as opposed to other things, that's kind of what they're looking to give up. So if you can make certain adjustments when it comes to that, as opposed to just sitting on the perimeter, I think that's what you kind of see the lulls in their offense a lot of times is it's just guys kind of standing five out around the perimeter. And whenever it comes down to 10 seconds on the shot clock, now guys have to go one on one. It causes tough shots for guys like RJ, Ian, Elliott, and then teams are able to get out in transition if it's a bad shot. So making those kind of adjustments, I think, is going to be key for this offense because then it just completely changes the way that the defense can guard as well, and it leaves more space for Jay Wash rolling more effectively. It leaves more space for RJ to come off that and maybe not be able to be doubled because now all it takes is one advanced pass and they're in rotations. So there's just a bunch of different little things that they can make, and I think if they do that, I think it can kind of change the way this offense looks.
A couple of notes from me. First of all, if you're listening to us on podcast, we appreciate you listening. We just did a little bit of a film breakdown there that our YouTube viewers got to check out. So this is a great excuse for you to pop on the YouTube channel after you're done walking your dog or driving, whatever you might be doing, listening to our show here, and check out some more of this film breakdown to see some of these visuals. I'm going to pull up one more little example here from this clip of the Jay Witt dunk. Something that stands out to me here, number one, really, really great pass by Elliott Cadeau, because when you freeze it right here, it does not look like anyone's open. So when we talk about Elliott being a great passer and a basketball genius, he's throwing this ball basically before Jay Witt has even left the three-point line. So he has to know that it's a safe pass to make, but also he has to know exactly where to place it, knowing the athleticism of his teammate. So an excellent pass there. And I think it brings up one more point for me, which is I really want to see UNC's bigs setting strong screens and then getting north and south. So in this case, it's Jalen Washington out there on the perimeter. He's setting the screen and then really driving hard to the basket because that's what's opening up these driving lanes, the three-point shots. Um, UNC hasn't had that at all times this season, that consistent hard screening and then hard rolling to the basket. That's not necessarily something, you can be a little bit undersized and you can still roll really hard to the basket and you can still set a really good screen as well. Another piece of this is, knowing where to go and some of the off-ball movement associated with that, the cutting that has to happen in order to get these open layups and dunks. So this brings up a question here from Sherelle. So I'll bring this question in. Friend of the program, Sherelle McMillan. Why do you think the off-ball movement isn't consistent this season, Justin?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think this is the first game that I've really seen a team start to kind of roam the low defender as the helper. Um, all season, I've really kind of seen, for the most part, them be able to play in kind of an open, a 4 out, 1 in, 5 out, open type spacing. And there's not really a clog man. And when I say clog man, kind of like what you're seeing in those pictures of somebody that's just, I mean, having a guy tag from somebody from the top of the key and be in the charge circle, that's an extreme example of somebody just kind of roaming and helping in any area that they possibly can. So I think when it comes to the movement, they haven't necessarily needed to do all of that movement. I mean, like we say, going into the ACC, their offense really wasn't the issue, right? Like their offense was, I want to say it was like top 20 in the country when it came to points per game, or, you know, I don't think that was necessarily an issue. Now that teams are starting to do this, and I think you're going to start seeing it more in the ACC, I think now you will start to see more consistent movement. The tough part about just random movement in a 5 out, 4 out, 1 in type offense is a lot of times your movement can kind of clog things up even more. So you want to have guys spaced to the corner. You want to have guys spaced high and out on the wings, and you want to leave space for those actions to happen. But whenever you start to see these kind of adjustments, I think is kind of when you'll see guys cutting, or maybe you'll start seeing those type of guys. Those are the ones that are setting the screen because their guys are off their body, right? Like you'll start seeing little adjustments like that, I think, more now that these teams are making these adjustments. But up to this point, they didn't really need to. And so I think that's why you haven't seen it consistently throughout the year. But I think you'll start to see it, as this conference play continues.
This has been a really great discussion, a film breakdown. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about our sponsors for this show. Then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the Notre Dame game and look ahead a little bit to SMU. We want to thank and acknowledge our main sponsors for Shooting It Straight, our podcast. First, Johnny T-Shirt. They are the best place for Tar Heel gear, a Chapel Hill tradition since 1983 and 20-year partners of Inside Carolina. Visit them on Franklin Street or check out their online store for all of your Tar Heel gear needs. If you're headed to Chapel Hill tomorrow for the game, I think it's a late tip, 9 o'clock. Be sure to check out Johnny T-Shirt before you head over to the Smith Center. And also, we want to give a shout out to Congruity, the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners' payroll, HR, and employee benefits needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR needs assessment by emailing Matt at Congruity. We're going to take a quick break for the national ads now. As Tommy likes to say, let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be right back with more UNC basketball talk. You are listening to the Shooting It Straight podcast with Justin Jackson here live as we are every single Monday night during the UNC basketball season. We appreciate the 106 listeners that we have here live talking UNC basketball with us tonight. We've already gotten a lot of great questions from the chat, so be sure to throw another question in there if there's anything else that you want Justin and I to hit on over the course of the show. We're going to start to look ahead a little bit to the game against SMU, but also to kind of hit on the name of this show, the home reset for UNC basketball. North Carolina has played a brutal non-conference schedule. They have been all over the country. They've played in hostile environments. They've had a lot of travel, a lot of miles racked up. Justin, what do you think this stretch in the schedule can do for this team? The next few games are all in the state of North Carolina, road trips to NC State and Wake Forest, which are not necessarily easy games, but less travel associated with them. How can this help the team as they kind of get a little bit of an opportunity to reset over the month of January?
Yeah, anytime you're able to play at home for one is always huge. Having the home crowd, being able to be in your own routine, your own room, um, eat at the places that you love to eat at, things like that. That's always key. That's always going to be big. Um, I think it's a little skewed when it comes to the next 6 games in North Carolina because going to NC State is not an easy game. I mean, that's one of the most hostile places you can go as a Tar Heel. So going and playing there is not going to be easy, whether they're, I think they're 8-6 as well right now. So, um, that's going to be a tough one. Wake is always going to be a tough one. I think for me, it's more of the importance of these games. When you look at an SMU, I think maybe they're a quad two game. I think Wake Forest and NC State are considered quad two as of right now. I think it's a matter of the importance of these games, right? You've got a Cal team. I think as a fan, I'm interested to see. I mean, those are 3 teams that have never been in the Dean Dome. In SMU, Cal, Stanford, maybe they have in some random game that I don't know about. But as far as my, remembering here recently, I don't remember either of those 3 teams coming into the Dean Dome. So I'm interested to kind of see that. It's a different style of play. We'll hit on SMU. SMU is a bigger, longer type of team. Um, and so I think it's just kind of the importance of these games. Winning a rivalry game like NC State, that's huge. But also the fact that it's a quad two, that's huge for the resume. And then going into Wake Forest, going and winning at those type of hostile environments, I think is really big for these guys. But hey, let's get a little rhythm going in the Dean Dome. Let's get the fans up. Let's get the fans going. Let's fire on their energy, and let's kind of get on a roll and get some momentum going forward, um, and kind of see what kind of run these guys can make. So these 6 games are huge to be able to be at home. Not a ton of travel days. Don't have to be away from your own bed, your own routine, everything like that too much. So that's gonna be big.
Yeah, and this team absolutely needs it. The opportunity to play in front of the home crowd, build on the momentum from the Notre Dame win. It's an opportunity for the fans to make a positive impact on the season in that game tomorrow night against SMU. This is going back a little bit, but I think it's a good question, Justin. So I'm going to pull this up. We were talking earlier about Seth and his impact, or excuse me, his absence. Bart had a question about that. How long does it take to get back in game shape after missing a few weeks? How does a player process that? So talk about the physical piece of it, Justin, in terms of getting your lungs back and things like that, but maybe also the mental piece of it, because
Mhm.
you want to be out there with your teammates, you want to be playing. What's that like as a player?
Yeah, I mean, game shape is the perfect word for uh, what we're talking about because there's nothing that can get you back into shape for a game like playing in a game, right? But this whole time, I'm sure if it's an upper body, they've been kind of mute on kind of what kind of injury it is. But if he's been able to do conditioning, I'm sure he's been doing conditioning every single day. I'm sure he's been doing, some sort of individual workouts of just, one on o type of thing where you're getting reps of shots and ball handling and passing and, also conditioning at the same time. So I think, for a guy like Seth, if I had to guess, maybe this first game is kind of one where you got to kind of get your wind. But then once you find it, then you're good to go. I think mentally, it's just a matter of trying to still be aggressive. It might be a little weird for him, especially if he's coming off the bench with kind of this new lineup. It might be a little weird because he got kind of accustomed to being that starter, being one of the main guys involved early on, and that sort of thing. So for him, it might take maybe a little bit into the first half of kind of finding his footing and his rhythm. But Seth's also played, in college basketball for a while now, so I wouldn't expect it to take him too long to kind of get readjusted and things like that. I think the wind will come, as he gets on the floor, as he kind of gets going. Probably that first pressure defensively. Once he kind of catches his wind from that, I think he'll be good to go. But it changes from person to person. For me, I never really fell out of conditioning too fast. I was usually able to kind of hop right back in and be pretty well conditioned still. Some guys I've seen, if they miss a week of games in practice, it takes them about a week to get back into the same shape that they were in. So it just kind of depends. I think the way Seth is, I don't think it'll take too long.
What was your Carolina mile time again? You were pretty quick in that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, running was always I'll say easy. It wasn't necessarily easy in the moment, but people always said I was always a decent runner. I think I ran a 5:15 maybe. I'll remember because Luke May beat me his freshman year. Was it freshman year? Maybe both years. It might have been his freshman and sophomore year. My sophomore and junior year, he beat me in both. Um, By my junior year, I wasn't necessarily trying to prove anything too much, um, but yeah, running was always pretty easy for me. So when it came to this, it wasn't necessarily that hard. But like I said, some guys it takes a little longer, whether it's a big or wing player or guard. It just kind of depends.
I'll tell you, when you get to be my age, a little older, I take 1 week off of pickup basketball, and it takes me about a month to get back to where I was before. My wind goes very quickly these days. I'm a little bit out of shape, but it's all good. Chip asked as well, real quick about. Oh, sorry, this was the question here about Seth. We are not confirming that Seth is playing tomorrow. We mentioned that earlier in the show that Hubert mentioned that he practiced with the team on Sunday, but he would still his status is still in doubt. We're not sure whether or not he'll be playing tomorrow night. So stay tuned to Inside Carolina for updates on that before the game against SMU. And let's look ahead to that game a little bit. It's a critical conference game for the Tar Heels against a new opponent, the Mustangs of SMU, a new member of the ACC. First thing that jumps off the page for me, this is a huge team. In Ken Palm's average height metric, they're 39th in the country. That just means they're really, really tall. In the same metric, UNC is 310th. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know about the disparity in height. And also, SMU is a really, really strong offensive rebounding team. So that's going to be a key for North Carolina staying on the glass. Justin, what are some of the things that stand out for you about this UNC SMU matchup?
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult matchup for all the reasons you just mentioned. They have a lot of size, not only from the big position, but also from the wings. I think their starting three man is 6'7" or something like that, and everybody else is 6'4" besides their point guard, who is over the last 3 games averaging 21. Who's the transfer? I think he came from Wake Forest actually, so he's used to ACC play. He's used to how North Carolina plays. So I mean, it's a tough matchup. The size, I think they're shooting 38% from three as a team right now, so far in this season, so they can really shoot it. A guy like Chuck Harris for them shoots at 47% from three. So it's a difficult matchup, but I think where these guys can take advantage is getting stops, getting out in transition, using their speed, using their versatility and their pressure and their physicality defensively to speed these guys up and to make these guys uncomfortable. I know for me, being a taller wing, I hated when little guards got up and pressured me and got physical with me. That was one of the things that I hated the most when it came to going against a defender was somebody that was able to kind of get up into me, make me feel uncomfortable, take a couple steps back, and not be able to kind of just be you know free flowing and play with a rhythm. So for me with this team, I'm looking for North Carolina to from the jump pressure, 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 be physical. Is it going to be perfect? No. There's going to be offensive rebounds given up. There's going to be some, you know, blown assignments at times if you're playing as hard as you possibly can. But being the first team to hit, being the most physical, the hardest playing team, the team that pressures, I'd love to see some of that full court pressure just to speed guys up a little bit and make them not feel as comfortable. Um, and then back into a defense. I'd love to see that kind of from the jump. So I think there's definitely ways for this North Carolina team to take advantage of, the size that SMU has. I think we have to go into this game knowing, like I said, there's going to be situations where there might be an offensive rebound putback. There might be oh, that guy's just bigger and stronger, right? Like there might just be some of those, but throughout the game, making sure that they always keep applying that pressure, and especially trying to get out and transition as much as possible, um, and then go at these guys. They're obviously they're brand new, brand new to the ACC. I'd love to see a welcome to the ACC moment from our North Carolina Tar Heels
Mhm.
coming into the Dean Dome, and letting SMU know that hey, welcome, but this is still kind of our territory. So hopefully they're able to do that, guard the 3-point line, be physical pressure, and do everything they can to try to get bodies on bodies to rebound. And, I think this team will be perfectly fine.
Yeah, I do not have the stat in front of me, but I can't imagine that SMU has come to Chapel Hill to play basketball too many times. So you're spot on there. An opportunity to show the strength of UNC's home court advantage tomorrow night. That game is 9 p.m. on ACC Network, so check that out. And the post-game podcast will be live after the game with Tommy and Rob to talk all about that. We'll be back next Monday to recap that game and to recap the NC State game. Last thing for you tonight, Justin. Eagle-eyed viewers of Saturday's game against Notre Dame, they might have realized there was a little promo after a commercial break or a timeout. We have in front of us here the most, I forget the exact word they used. I should have looked it up, but the most important big man or something on the 2017 team. They had a promo with, I think it was Tyler Hansbrough. They had Eric Montross on there as well. And then Justin, you were included there. Were you a little surprised to see yourself called a big man on a team with so many other great Tar Heel big men like Kennedy and Isaiah? Were you surprised to see yourself included in that?
Well, we didn't have our. I was with my family, and we didn't have our volume up. And so when they put it up there at first, I thought they were just talking about the best players from those teams because I think, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of them were the best players on those teams. Um, And so, but then we rewound it and we turned the volume up and we heard him talking about like the cornerstone bigs of each team and that sort of thing. And um, we all just started dying laughing because I was like, I definitely wasn't a big. And if anybody deserves being called a cornerstone big of the team, it was not me.
Mhm.
We had some guys on there that would, in Kennedy, Isaiah, Bryce, my sophomore year, like we had some guys that were unreal. So, yeah, it was funny. It was funny to see that. I played some stretch four here and there my junior year, but I wouldn't necessarily say I was a big. So I appreciate. I think what that was on CBS. So I appreciate the
Mhm.
shout out CBS. So I'll take it. I won't. I won't question anything. I won't say anything like that. But I'll take it.
Another item to add there to your resume for basketball accomplishments. Justin, any final thoughts tonight? Any final thoughts for our 101 live viewers? We appreciate everyone watching us here live on YouTube. Thanks for checking it out. Make sure you are subscribed to Inside Carolina as well. We see some new names in the chat, excuse me, along with some of our regulars like Sean and Melinda. So thanks everyone for watching. Justin, any final thoughts? Take us out here on a Monday night.
No, I'm very excited for this game against SMU just to see how this team goes against this kind of matchup. A team that's longer, taller, but also very easily can be taken advantage of at certain aspects of the game. And so I'm very interested to see, does this UNC team come out from the jump with the energy that it needs, with the physicality and the mental, being locked in from the jump. If they do, I think they win this game pretty easily. I think that they're able to they're able to hit SMU first. I think, with the crowd behind them, with guys knocking down shots, playing confidently, playing in a rhythm, having a guy hopefully like Seth back and everything that he brings for this team. I'm very excited for this game, and hopefully these guys are too. So, I want to say obviously thank you to everybody that showed up, all the new people, everybody that comes through every single Monday. We appreciate you always. Hopefully, some things that we talked about today was easy enough to understand. Hopefully, I was able to communicate in a way that you were able to understand it. And you know, I'm very interested to see some of the adjustments and things that are made. So, hey, let's get our cheering hats on. Let's get ready for this game, and hopefully, the guys come to play.